everyone is having a great week. I hope that you are ready to get some good sleep tonight to start the next week tomorrow. And today I decided to go ahead and read 2 chapters of Vidia and the Fairy Crown, because last time I read 1 chapter, but it just seemed like a really short amount of time to me. So I have opted to go ahead and go a little longer, as you know, if the case calls for it. I feel like that's a little bit more relaxing to get you ready for bed and all of that, so you can just kind of listen a little bit longer, give you some more time to relax. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to read chapters 4 and 5 of Vidia and the Fairy Crown, so that we can find out what is going on in Pixie Hollow with the Queen's crown. So, Vidia and Prilla met after breakfast in the lobby of the home tree the next morning. "Vidia!" Prilla exclaimed as the fast-flying fairy zipped through the front door. Prilla was eager to share with Vidia all the ideas she had for kicking off their investigation. She had come up with a list of fairies that they could question, leads they could follow. "Vidia, I've been thinking." "Thinking?" Vidia said. She cut Prilla off and flew right past her. Prilla had to rush to catch up. "Now why would you go and start experimenting with that?" Vidia asked snippily. Clearly, Vidia wasn't going to be nice to Prilla just because Prilla had offered to help her. "Come on," Vidia barked. "We'll start by questioning the Queen's helper fairies." Prilla struggled to keep up as she followed Vidia to the 2nd floor of the home tree. They turned down the southeastern hallway and flew up to the door to room 10A, where Queen Ree lived. Vidia knocked loudly on the door. When no one answered right away, she impatiently knocked again, more loudly. Cinda opened the door. She peeked out into the hall. "Ah, Cinda," said Vidia. She brushed past her into the Queen's sitting room without waiting to be invited in. "What a brave little fairy you were last night, darling. Coming forward to tell your tale in front of that big, starry crowd." Vidia flashed Cinda a sickly sweet smile. "But we have just a few more questions to ask you and your fellow helper fairies, don't we, Prilla?" Prilla hadn't gotten any farther than the doorway. She had never been inside the Queen's rooms before. She stood gazing at the elegant surroundings. The sitting room had pale peach walls, overstuffed sofas, and floral carpet. Beyond the sitting room were the sea green walls of the Queen's bedroom. Prilla could see one corner of a large, high 4-poster bed. The 3 other helper fairies, Rhea, Liesel, and Grace, flew out from the Queen's bedroom. They were carrying a pile of the softest spiderweb bed linen. They landed abruptly when they saw Vidia. "What's she doing here?" Liesel asked Cinda with a sneer. Rhea and Grace also eyed Vidia wearily. It was obvious that they thought she was guilty of stealing the crown. Prilla flew forward and tried to smooth things over. "We'd just like to ask you some questions about yesterday," she said hopefully, "so we can prepare Vidia's defense for tomorrow." "We?" said Grace, her eyes wide with surprise. "Prilla, you are actually helping her?" Prilla shrugged, and her glow flared. "Yes," she replied. "There's no proof that Vidia took the crown." "No proof yet," Liesel muttered under her breath. She turned away and led Grace, Rhea, and Cinda over to a large table on the far side of the sitting room. They set the sheets and pillowcases on the table and began folding them. "Listen, dearies," Vidia said. She flew across the room to hover over the helper fairies as they folded. "All I want to know is when each of you last saw the crown. It is your duty as the Queen's helper fairies to take care of all of her belongings, right? But perhaps in this case you lost track of a certain something. Perhaps you don't remember when you last saw the crown." The helper fairy's pride rose to Vidia's challenge. "Of course, we remembered," Grace protested. "The last time I saw the crown was the day before yesterday in the evening. I put it back into the crown cabinet after Queen Rhee wore it down to dinner." Liesel nodded. "That's right," she said. She added a folded bedsheet to the growing pile. "I saw Grace put it away that evening. I was here in the room when she did it. That was the last time I saw the crown." Cinda shook the wrinkles out of a pillowcase. "I saw the crown yesterday morning," she said. "Rhea took it out of the cabinet to make sure it was ready for the party. Right, Rhea?" "Right," Rhea replied. "I took the crown out and started to clean it when I noticed that there was a small dent in the metal." Rhea looked around at her fellow helper fairies. "Well, I didn't think it was right for the queen to have a dent in her crown at her own party." Then the other fairies nodded. "So I took the crown up to the crown repair shop to have it fixed." Vidia zipped excitedly to Rhea's side. "And when was this?" Vidia asked. "Yesterday morning," Rhea said. She described how she had put the crown in its black velvet carrying pouch, taken it up to the crown repair shop, and left it with Aiden, the crown repair sparrowman. "I told him what needed to be fixed. I told him it was a rush. And I asked him to bring it back to the Queen's chambers when he was done." "I see," Vidia replied. "And he did? He brought it back?" Rhea nodded confidently. "Yes." Then her brow wrinkled. I think so." Her glow flared. "Well, actually, I don't know for sure." The three other helper fairies stopped folding. They stared at Rhea. "Rhea," said Liesel in shock. "What do you mean you don't know for sure?" "Well, Rhea stammered. "I told him I might not be here when he brought it back, but I would be in and out. I told him he could leave it with any one of us who was here." Rhea's eyes searched her friends' faces. "Didn't any of you see him bring it back yesterday?" she asked hopefully. Liesel shook her head. "Not me," said Grace. "Me neither," said Cinda. Rhea covered her mouth with her hand. It muffled the sound when she cried, "Oh no!" Prilla shot Vidia an aha look. "Well, if Rhea took the crown to Aiden," Prilla said, "and none of you saw the crown after that." Vidia zipped toward the door. "Come on, Prilla," she said, calling behind her. "We have a crown repair sparrowman to visit." Chapter 5. By the time Prilla caught up with Vidia on the 5th floor of the home tree, Vidia was already questioning Aiden in the crown repair workshop. "What do you mean you didn't see the crown yesterday?" Vidia was shouting. She hovered over Aiden while he sat at his workbench. "Rhea said she brought it to you to be fixed." "I did," explained a voice behind Prilla. She turned to find Rhea standing in the doorway of the workshop. Prilla didn't realize that Rhea had followed her up from the Queen's rooms. She had wanted to hear Aiden's side of the story, too. Aiden nervously scratched his ginger-colored hair. He looked shocked. Moments before, he had had his quiet workshop all to himself, as he did most days. Aiden's talent was a specialized one. There weren't many crowns in Pixie Hollow in need of repair. In fact, there weren't many crowns in Pixie Hollow at all. So most of Aiden's time was spent on his own perfecting his crown repair skills. As a result of his lonely work, Aiden was quite shy. Even from far away, Vidia scared him. Now suddenly here she was, hovering over him and shouting. "Please," said Aiden. He held up his hands in surrender. I'm telling you the truth. I saw Rhea yesterday, but I didn't see the Queen's crown." Rhea flew across the workshop and landed at Aiden's side. "Don't you remember?" she asked. She described again how she had come to the workshop on the previous day. She had asked Aiden to fix the dent in the crown and told him it was a rush, and then left the crown there. I asked you to bring it back to the Queen's chambers when you were done, so why didn't you? Aiden's big green eyes had grown wider as Rhea told her story. Is that why you came into my workshop yesterday? He asked her. Rhea, when you came in yesterday, I had just finished doing some work with my gemstone drill. Aiden reached across his workbench and he picked up a tool that looked like a cross between a hand mixer and a screwdriver. It works well, but it makes a terrible racket. Here, I'll show you. Aiden took a piece of quartz from a pile of stones to his left. He aimed the drill bit at the quartz with one hand. He turned the drill's crank with the other. A deafening, high-pitched squeal filled the workshop. Vidia, Prilla, and Rhea covered their ears with their hands. Stop, stop, stop! Vidia shouted over the noise. Aiden stopped drilling. Prilla uncovered her ears. Gosh, Aiden, she said, how do you stand it? Aiden reached into the pockets of his baggy work pants. I use these, he replied. Pulling his hands out of his pockets, he opened them to reveal several wads of dandelion fluff. He then stuffed the wad in each ear to show how it worked. Let's cut to the chase, Vidia snapped impatiently. What does this have to do with the missing crown? What? Said Aiden loudly. Vidia sighed and yanked the fluff out of his ears. Why do I care about your earplugs? She shouted. Aiden shrank from Vidia. He turned toward Rhea instead. Well, when you came in yesterday, I had my back to you, didn't I? Rhea nodded. I still had the dandelion fluff in my ears, said Aiden, because I was working with the drill. He shrugged. So whatever you said, I didn't hear. When I turned and saw you standing in the doorway, I waved, remember? But then you turned and left, so I figured you had just dropped by to say hello. Rhea held her head in her hands. And I thought you were waving to show that you had heard everything that I said. She groaned. Then an idea came to her. But whether you heard me or not, I did leave the crown here. She flew over to a tree-barked table near the door of the workshop. She pointed to a specific spot on the table. It was in a black velvet carrying pouch. I put it right here. But there was no sign of the crown or the pouch anywhere on the table. Just a jumble of scrap metal that Aiden had tossed into a pile. Well, said Prilla hopefully, maybe it's around here somewhere. She peeked under the table. Rhea checked inside some nearby cupboards. But there was no crown or velvet pouch to be found. Prilla sighed. Aiden, she said, did someone else come into your workshop yesterday? Anyone besides Rhea? Aiden thought it over, then nodded. Yes, Twire came by, he replied. Twire? Said Rhea. The scrap metal recovery fairy? Aiden nodded again. He pointed to the pile of scrap metal on the table next to the door. He picked up yesterday's scrap metal. He melts it down and recycles it. Prilla gasped. Rhea groaned. Vidia pursed her lips and shook her head. What? Said Aiden. Vidia flashed Aiden her sickly sweet smile. Don't you see, pet? She said. If the crown was on that table next to the scrap metal when Twire came to pick it up, she might have taken the crown away with the metal, Rhea continued the thought. Prilla gulped and melted it down. Well, that's the end of chapter 5. So next week, we'll read chapter 6 and chapter 7 and find out what happened when Twire came to the shop. I mean, there are 10 chapters in this book, so a lot can happen in the rest of the book. So hopefully they were able to find the crown. So we'll see what happens. Good night.